Hello everybody and welcome back to Home and Rehab Live. This is Alec, the physical therapist, and I'm going to talk to you guys today again about, you know me, more good news. It's my favorite thing to deliver because, it makes me happy to do. So, I literally just saw a study that came out today that I wanted to talk about because it's got some really great implications for what's been going on in the world lately. So there are different levels of trials that we do when it comes down to attempting to figure out if something is effective and worthwhile for people when we're working on treatment. Specifically in viral treatment, what we'll usually do is first something called an in vitro study. So this is when we have a petri dish full of whatever we're trying to get rid of, we put a medication on it, and we see if it kills it. It's a great start though, because we don't know if something works on a lab basis unless we try it. And so that was one of the first things that was done with a lot of the potential vaccines and antibody tests that have been performed on what's going around right now, COVID-19, to see whether or not there was any potential for this to work in vivo, in a live organism. So the first test is see, hey, does it work? And when we looked at the initial in vitro tests, we did see that the presence of antibodies does seem to provide some level of potential immunity. But whether or not it works in living beings is always far more difficult. So, I'm sorry, I just had a weird error on my phone. That should work. Okay, so what we want to see then is, all right, if someone has antibodies, whether through vaccination or whether because they've previously been infected, are they less likely to be infected again if they are exposed? Now this is classically what we hope is going to happen with any vaccine. It's what we usually have with the flu vaccine. When we have anything going around, whether it is the current strain that has been vaccinated for or a new strain, having a previous vaccine does seem to boost immunity, whether it's preventing the illness entirely or decreasing the viral load to the point where we don't seem to get very many severe symptoms. So we were wondering, is that going to work for this disease? And the answer seems to be yes right now. Now, the study that was published as of today, studies specifically this in macaque monkeys, which sounds, oh no, that's not humans. And the reason we do it in monkeys is very frankly because we can control exactly what's happening in the environment. We know when they've been exposed, we know when the symptoms are developed, and we can very, very closely follow things without potentially exposing a living human being again to the virus. And one of the things that makes this hard when we're just watching the general population is most people, once they've had this, from what I understand from the people I've known who've had it, this is essentially like having an elephant sit on your chest for 2 weeks long. It's apparently extremely uncomfortable when you get a bad case. So those people, when they get over it, they will do everything they can to not be exposed again, which doesn't help us determine if they're immune, and that's okay. So what we have to do is find a way to control that, and that's why they did this monkey study, is because their genetics is very, very similar to ours. If they are immune, there is high potential that we will be too. And the answer was yes. Great news, right? So of course, me being a nerd, I'm going to tell you all about what they did because I think that's important. So what they did was they took two different groups, and of course one was never exposed to the virus and received no vaccination. The other group was vaccinated. What this should do, theoretically, is by introducing a particular portion of the RNA of this virus, it should allow the body to recognize that, form an antibody against it, so that if the virus ever does really hit, our body is prepared to hit it hard immediately. Depending on the viral load that we are exposed to and depending on our own personal genetics and a variety of other factors, that antibody may or may not be enough to completely prevent the illness, but it should be enough to at least make it less severe. So of course then, once that we've had enough time for the vaccine to kick in, what we should then see is, all right, if I expose you on purpose, how much virus do you produce? So they did exactly that. They took the group of monkeys that had never been exposed to the virus and never been vaccinated, and they exposed them to the virus, and after a certain amount of time did a count to see how much RNA was produced. The great news was a lot. The reason that's good news is because when they compared it to the monkeys that had been exposed to the vaccine, 80% of them showed no viral traces inside their bloodstream, which means that if they had the virus anywhere in them, it was so low it was not affecting them at all. So, with both being exposed to the virus in the same time in the same manner, the group that had been vaccinated, 80% of them were not even affected. The remaining 20%, the ones that were still affected, were affected at drastically reduced levels to the group that had never been vaccinated. So what that shows us is that there is great potential for these vaccines to work, which is something that we've been worried about for a little while, because frankly, we didn't know. This is a brand new virus. It's behaving differently than a lot of things we've expected. We need to know, is it going to work at this level as expected? And thankfully, the answer looks like it's going to be a good yes. What this also may mean, again, we still need to do more testing on this, is people who've developed antibodies in the way of having been infected and gotten over the virus. These people have better chances of also showing a similar level of immunity to someone who is vaccinated. Similar to what happens with the chickenpox. You can either get a chickenpox vaccine, or if you've already had it, it's likely that your body has the antibodies it needs either way to protect you from it again. And again, like with chickenpox, it's not guaranteed. There are cases of people getting chickenpox twice, and there are some cases, of course, relapse, where the virus comes back and forms a different set of symptoms, like with shingles. Either way, you are better protected whether you've had the vaccine or if you had the antibodies in general. Now, one of the things I will always discourage is something that does happen with chickenpox, and that is something that was known in my childhood as a chickenpox party, which is, oh, this person is known to have it, I should try and get it so that I develop the antibodies and I don't have to pay for a vaccine. The problem is, when we have a vaccine, it's something that's called attenuated usually, or it's non-live. Essentially what we're doing is we're giving you a small strand of inactive RNA so that your body can recognize it as bad, create the antibodies without you ever getting the disease itself. So the disease cannot self-replicate. Now, because your body is actively trying to form an aggressive response against this foreign RNA, whether or not it's active, sometimes you will get some symptoms you would normally associate with being sick. Because things like fever and body aches are actually part of your immune system's response to something foreign in the body, not the foreign body itself. So, sometimes you will occasionally get flu-like symptoms from something like a flu vaccine, depending on what you associate with the flu symptom. If you're talking about fever, well, fever is your body's natural response to a foreign thing in it. That is not necessarily illness, it is a sign of your body being active against one. That's okay. It can be uncomfortable at the time, but thankfully it doesn't mean we've gotten the disease, because the disease itself is what we're scared of, not the symptoms. So, what we would see in this case is people developing at most minor symptoms and then having the potential 80% immunity and high level of protection that we would get from the vaccine. On the other hand, if you get antibodies through exposure, you do stand a relatively high chance of actively developing severe symptoms. Severe symptoms in this case are far more common than we thought. And while survivability is high on average, there are certain populations that are extremely susceptible, and we do stand to see a high amount of severe issues. Unfortunately, an acquaintance of mine and a very close friend of a lot of my friends just passed away from complications of this. He's a young man, or was unfortunately, a young man who was very healthy and very active prior to this. Meaning that this is not a perfectly safe thing to do, is just purposely go expose yourself for the sake of antibodies, and I would not encourage that. However, if you have been exposed and have developed antibodies, there is a lot of potential for you to not have to worry about this in the future. Again, like we said, there is a level of exposure with protection, which means you could still develop a minor form of this, but the odds of it being more severe are extremely low, and we do seem to be far more protected. So, there's good news on this front. From my understanding, if you guys live in Florida, if you are a blood donor, we are already being tested for antibodies when we go in to see whether or not the blood is safe to give to somebody else. But those results will also be forwarded to you. So people who are donating blood already, you should be expecting results like this to find out a little bit more about your own health. If you guys have more questions about these issues or anything else that's going on, please let us know. Like you can tell, we're trying to keep up as much as we can to make sure we're keeping our own patients safe and providing the best advice we can. Obviously, I'm not an epidemiologist, so there's a lot that I am actively learning right now. My epidemiology courses were many years ago and not as up to date as some of the experts in the field right now. So again, always take what I'm saying with that grain of understanding as well. I am somebody who's excited about this, reads the research, but I am not to the level of expert of one of the high-level epidemiologists. Always take all of the clinicians, whether it's myself or other doctors at my level, at that level. Make sure that you understand that while we're giving our opinions based off of our understanding does have some small flaws, so always take what we're saying with that little grain of salt. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you guys later.